What up, watch peeps? I think the downward trend in watch sizes has been reflected in the stuff I've had on the channel lately, but not today. I do not want my large-wristed, man-handed friends to feel neglected, so I've got one for you today. Boldr was kind enough to lend in an Odyssey Silver Wave. They seem to have found their niche in like rugged field watches, overbuilt dive watches. So let's take a look at the one I've got today. I'm Pete, and we are chilling with watches. Wrist check. I am wearing the Seiko speed timer, and oh, I am absolutely crushing hard on this watch. I love the way it feels on wrist. It's got just the right amount of, I don't know what you call it, substance maybe? And I think it looks fantastic. But let's crack open this case and see what we've got here today. Well, I think I got a testosterone boost just cracking open this case. So this is one of the full-size 45mm Boldr Odysseys. This particular colorway is called the Silver Wave. They also have a Boldr Odyssey Freedivers, which come in at 40mm. Color-wise, this latest run is available in a black, blue, green, and this silver we have here, and the price is $650. Now, ever since the first Odyssey Metal Blue, I have loved this case design. This model is obviously a little big for me, or maybe just for my current preferences. I'd love to check out the 40, but I have a feeling I would absolutely love the 40mm. This design definitely calls forth some feelings of the Seiko Samurai, but despite not being much larger in terms of the numbers, this one wears significantly larger than the Seiko Samurai. In part, I think that is due to the larger lug to lug. Super interesting dial on this one. It's got depth, it's got texture, and a super clean execution. You know, with my newfound love for silver dials, I do find this one quite attractive. You got sand texture in the middle, you've got kind of the sun ray finish on the outside. I guess technically making this a sector dial, and it's the kind of single color sector dials that I actually really like. You have really nice applied indices, date window at 6 o'clock, maintaining your symmetry, and you have this minute track around the outside, which sits at yet another level just above the sunray portion that the indices sit on. You have this really large grip, kind of scalloped bezel with a loomed sapphire insert. In this case, I do think the glossy finish sapphire insert suits the dial well. They go together well. The action on this thing is fantastic. You have just the slightest bounce back after each click, but very little, if any, movement after that. Now, I love cases with multiple flat planes like this. This case side actually gives the illusion, if you're looking here, of having a really drastic turn down at the lugs, but there's actually like another plane sitting up here, which means this thing is actually quite flat. You have this helium escape valve at 9 o'clock. I don't care for HE valves. They're useless to me, and most likely all of you as well. On the crown side, you have a bumpin' big 9mm crown, which is something I do like. It is super easy to use, has a ton of threads, and a whole gang of gaskets in there, if you can see that. Again, the grip on the crown is kind of very coarse, almost scalloped, really cohesive with what they're doing on the bezel. And we have a hexad style bracelet, which again works as well here as it does on the Samurai. You have these male end links, which add to an already kind of sizable lug to lug. On paper, I wouldn't think there's any way that my 7 1/4 inch wrist can support this, but there's actually no overhang. And if you like large watches, I think you'll be able to manage it. Now the bracelet tapers from 22 down to 20, only a 2mm taper, but I think that's fine here, as this watch needs the weight to counter the large head. And then it is, of course, finished off with a very robust clasp with 2-button release, safety fold over, and a whole slew of micro adjust. All right, this thing is running a Miyota 9015, so what do you say we throw it on the Timegrapher and see how it's running? Seems to have settled in at about plus 19 dial up. Not the greatest performance out of this Miyota 9015, but I think it is in spec. You do have a reasonable amplitude and a reasonable beat error. Altogether, not terrible, but also not great. Taking a look at the dimensions, if I measure the case from here to here, we're looking at 46 millimeters, but it is 45 millimeters at the bezel. The lug to lug comes in at a substantial 53 millimeters, but you do have these male end links, which bring it out to almost 59. Thickness, it comes in at 16.2 millimeters thick, and that is including this slightly domed sapphire crystal. And of course, you have a 22 millimeter lug width. Going over some of the other specs. As I just mentioned, you have a slightly domed sapphire crystal. It is using Swiss Super Luminova on the dial, hands, and in the bezel insert. It's running a Miyota 9015 and has 500 meters of water resistance. And on this bracelet, sized for my 7¼ inch wrist, it comes in at a whopping 236 grams. All right, let's take a look at it on wrist. As you can see, it is a big boy, but there's actually not really any overhang, and it does sit reasonably well on the wrist, despite being a tad bit tall. I think if you have a larger wrist than 7¼ you are absolutely fine with this, or even if you have 7¼ 7-inch wrist and you like really large watches, you will be absolutely cool with this wrist presence. All right, let's take a look at it side by side, some other watches. All right, I don't have a Samurai, but I do have some watches here that I think are a fair comparison. We'll start off first with the Seiko Sumo. Again, the Seiko with a smaller dial opening is going to give a smaller appearance. I love the way the Sumo wears. That case shape is incredible. But I think overall, yeah, that Boldr is going to wear and is a slightly larger watch than the Sumo. Here we have a Solar Tuna. Now these actually come in at about the same size, but because they're all the way round and they do not have the lugs, they are going to present and wear as a smaller watch. These actually wear quite comfortable for their size. And again, that dial opening is always going to play an illusion on you. Lastly, I have here a Zelos Hammerhead. Now this is one of the originals, one of the larger, thicker Zelos. I just love this watch. It's one of the ones I've had the longest. But it is, I think it's only about a millimeter or two smaller than the Boldr. But again, smaller dial opening, smaller bezel. It presents as a smaller watch. Oh, and lastly, I guess because we need to, I have an SKX here because I know you guys want that baseline comparison. All right, lastly, let's take a look at that Swiss Super Luminova.
Peep the loom.
And there you go. Check that out. Boldr is another one of these micro brands that does loom really well. Nothing fancy here, no C3 or anything, just regular Swiss Super Luminova, but if you use enough of it, you will get a great result. So there it is, the Boldr Odyssey Silver Wave. I'm a big fan of this design. This particular model is a little too big for me, but there are plenty of you out there for whom this is just right. I will have to ask them about getting in one of the 40mm variants because I think I will absolutely love that one. All right, before I let you go, sneaker check. Getting cold enough to wear the Have a Night Day Air Force Ones, and that's it. I'm out. If it's not too much trouble, please like, subscribe, and come back next time. Peace.